Today I'm going to show you how to have the advanced navigation and also how to create an image gallery. So let's say we click on the section. Here we can see that we have section 1 and we have the content. And if you go to the section 2, you can see that you have the section 2 and the content. And clicking on the section 3, so we can see that we have section 3 and we have the content. And if you click on one, you can close it back, click on 2, then that will close, and click on 3 and that will close. And here we can see that we have an image pop up, which of course we can click anywhere and that image you close, and we can click anywhere and that image you close. Basically, this is done using the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So we use the JavaScript to perform the function, and we use the CSS to style the HTML. All right, so let's dive into what we have here. So I'll start with the HTML structure itself. So which of course is going to have the HTML, the head section, and then we have the style, which of course we are going to discuss later. But the structure of the HTML itself is HTML, the head section, and the body section. So the body section closes at here, and we can see we have the HTML finally closed. So within the body section, we have all the HTML that we want to use in order to display our web content. So now, talking about the navigation section, the one I show you the first time, so which is the section 1, section 2, and section 3. And if you come to here, basically you can see those sections. And here is my nav, and the nav is closed here. So I'm using the nav, which is coming from the HTML5, and we have the UL, which of course is the unordered list, and we have the li, which is the list that we have inside this unordered list. And for each of my section, you can see that I wrap that inside an href. And whenever we have a click on the section 1, so we use the toggle section in order to perform that action. So the toggle section is expecting an ID, so which is going to be corresponding to the section that we want to display. And the section that we want to display, as we can see, is right here. And whenever we click on the toggle section 1, and it's going to toggle this content. So that's what you saw the other time when we click on the toggle section 1. So you can see that that section is being toggled. And if you click, then it can close. If you click it again, it's toggle. If you click on the section 2, and that way basically close what we already have there, because that was toggled before. And section 3 also is now closed. And section 1 can also be closed. And toggling back, we can see the content coming for section 1. So basically, that is undone in the JavaScript side of this code. And now, how did we make this to basically toggle? So if I come to the style, so we have the style here, which is basically the CSS section. And let's try to remove this particular one now. I'll just cut it off, and we can save and go back to here. So let's run it. So you can see my section display all of the content that I have there. And why was that? So if I click on this, it still works though, but whenever we refresh, we have the content being displayed. And that is due to the fact that we have removed the CSS that actually hide the sections. So here is where we display, and we set it to none. Okay, and that is why whenever we run the code initially, we don't have any section display immediately, because that was display set to none. And the only time we set the display to block is when we click on the section, and that is done inside the JavaScript. So if I go back to the JavaScript right here, so we're going to see how we set that section to block using the section ID. And here we go. So we can see that right there. So we set section.style.display. We set it equal to none when it is equal to none. then we make sure that we switch that to block. And this is what we are doing here. So this is just like if statement saying that if the display of the section is none, then on the click of the toggle section, set it to block. Else, when we do click again, then you set it back to none. So this is what is happening in the toggle section function. And that's the function that we use in the HTML right here. So which means that whenever we toggle that section based on the ID that we have here, then this content should display. Again, don't forget that initially we set the display to none, which means that the section will not display until we click on the toggle button. And the same thing happens for the toggle section 2. So we take the ID, which is right here for this section, and this is it here, and we pass it down to the function, and the function locates the element by the ID, and if the elements display is equal to none, which of course by default it is none because we use the CSS to do that, and when we click on this toggle function, then it's going to set it back to block. And if we want to switch it back to none, then when it is blocked, we can switch it back to none. And that's how the section works. And let's go down to the image gallery. So for the image gallery, we can see that we have the div section, which is giving us a container, and we have a class that we call the gallery. And here I have my image, which is located in my images folder. And for us to have an image, we need to use the image tag. So as you can see right here, and also the source where we want to take the image from. So the source where the image is coming from my image folder and coming from the URL of the image, which is the computersmall.jpg. And I have a class which I call gallery image. So basically, because this is my gallery and this is an image for the gallery, so this class name actually makes sense to be gallery image. And we go on and we have the onClick function, which basically is going to allow us to perform an event. So whenever this show pop-up is clicked, then the image located in this URL should pop up. So this is what we want to do here. And we have 3 images here that we display, as you can see from here. So whenever we click on any one of these, then we should be able to see something like this. And that's what the show pop-up does in that code. So if we go back to here, so let's take a look at how the show pop-up works. The show pop-up basically works together with the hide pop-up, which is the div container that we have here. And here we notice that this is where we have the pop-up overlay. So which means that the background color that you can see here in this entire page is the overlay. And whenever we click on the show pop-up, then that is when this particular div is active. And we set the div here to be not showing at here. So here we can see pop-up overlay, which is the class name, and right here we can see the class name as pop-up overlay for this div, which is the entire container for here. And we use that pop-up overlay to say that here should be none initially. So as you can see, it is none, and we can talk about these ones later basically. So these ones are just basically setting the background color and every other stuff that belongs to the overlay. So I'm going to cut it off and we can check what happens to the code. So you can see that basically sets the background color and make sure that this looks nice a little bit. And if we put that back into the CSS for the pop-up overlay, then we should be able to see the background color and the width and the height being set up correctly. And here we can refresh and take a look at that. So here we go. Okay, cool. So now that we understand what a pop-up overlay does, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the show pop-up is actually doing based on the JavaScript that we've written for that. So coming down to the scripts, jav.js. So here we can see the function that show the pop-up. So this function is taking the image URL, as we can see, and we have the var pop-up, so which basically we are taking the we are getting the elements based on the ID, and the ID now is called a pop-up, which is the pop-up of the entire div that we can see right here. So let's go down a little bit and take a look at that. So the pop-up of this entire div. So that's the ID. Okay. So we want to show the entire div and show the image within that container. So if I go back here, so we have that ID and we call it a pop-up. And the same thing happens here, that we call this the pop-up image. Okay. So we call this the pop-up image, and here we said documents dot get element by ID again. So we are getting the ID of the pop-up image, which is located in the container of the pop-up overlay. So if I come back to here, so we can see the pop-up overlay, which is the container that takes care of the image that we actually pop up. And which means that from that container, we can hide the entire image on a click on that overlay. So if we come back to here, so here we can see the pop-up image dot src, which is the src of the image that we are popping up. And as a matter of fact, we do not set the source of the image right here at line 63. And the reason is because on a click on the show pop-up, that is the only time we know the URL of the image that we want to pop up. So the show pop-up is going to send down the URL. And from there, we take that URL and we use it to set up the pop-up image, which of course is going to allow each of the images that we have on the web page to be able to pop up according to the URL that has been assigned to the show pop-up. And right here we can see that the pop-up.style.display is set to block in this case. And the reason why we have to do that is because in the CSS, it was initially by default set to none. And for us to be able to see the content within the pop-up, we need to make sure that that is set to block. So if I go back to the pop-up container in our HTML, which is this entire div that we can see right here, this ID, and if I open it back, we can see that we have an image that we are showing as a pop-up inside our container. So initially this was set to be none, and that we can find at the top right here. So that's the pop-up overlay, which we set at none. And for us to make it active, we need to switch it back to block. And that's what we do here. Okay, cool. So now we're going to look into the hide pop-up. So the hide pop-up is basically going to hide the entire pop-up whenever we pop it up. And this is what we call the hide pop-up here. So this function is being taken care of right here. So we can see the function in our script, and we call it the pop-up, which is the same pop-up that we are talking about here. And here you can see we are using the same entire code. And what we are doing now is to make sure that the pop-up that we set to block here, we need to switch it off. And here we can see we set it back to none. So which means that whenever we hit on the hide pop-up, then this basically is going to switch off the pop-up image, and we won't see that on the screen anymore. So let's take off this particular function and see if our code is actually going to run. So I'll call it and I'll save it back. And here we can go back here and try to see what happens. So we pop, which is fine, but we can't hide anymore because the logic for hiding is gone. And in order to make it work back, we need to put our logic back, which is of course going to allow us to hide the image again. So I'll refresh, pop up, and the image is gone. So basically, this is how to create an image gallery and also the advanced navigation section, which of course will allow you to see the content inside your href. I hope this is helpful, and if you find this helpful, subscribe to this channel, and see you next time.